Hello everyone and welcome back to Chaos Infinity's tabletop discussions with, I guess maybe not discussions, but my tabletop gaming series. My name's Sage and I'm going to talk to you guys about tabletop gaming, just general topics, reviews and things like that. This is kind of a review, it's also kind of a lot of other things, but for those of you who have started playing in the last only 10 years or so, a lot of you don't really know. A lot of you may have heard stories here and there about various kind of edition wars, things like that. And, like I said, I started in the mid 90s, really got into it in 2001 or so. So I started with 3rd edition. Dungeons and Dragons, the infamous OG, the OG OGL, as it were, and around 2008, about 2007 maybe, Dungeons and Dragons announced they were going to do a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons, which honestly I think is too soon for what they were doing. And we're being completely honest, I think Dungeons and Dragons 5.5 is too soon for a new edition. I don't see anything that they're doing in this newest edition that they're really truly fixing. But in 2008, they released Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, which might be the most divisive edition of Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast has ever, TSR even has ever released. I know 2nd edition and advanced that had some, but it almost felt like a war when it came to Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. People hated it and I hated it with a passion, and I engaged in that kind of extremely negative, uncomfortable, no, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, just extremely negative and almost toxic rhetoric surrounding it. And I tried Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, and yep, there's my player's handbook. I tried it, and I did not like it. And I've recently reread it, and it's still garbage. It's not a good game. However, I am going to defend a lot of things in it tonight. A lot of things that I think going forward we could think about and learn about and kind of take with us when it comes to our tabletop gaming experience. First of all, I want to say that let me see if I can find him. The artwork in here is, in my opinion, absolutely hideous. It is. There's cleric. I think there are the Eladrin, which are high elves. I know people out there might think, but I think a lot of this stuff is gaudy, over designed. Dragonborn, that's what I'm looking for. Look at these guys as shields. That is so over designed, and just that dude's sword with the weird random crooks and hooks, and I think it's kind of ugly. Not necessarily ugly. It is over designed. It is a lot. Oh, you can even look at the cover with this dude's axe or sword or whatever it is. That is, I think it looks dumb. Personally, obviously it's an aesthetic choice, and there are people out there who are going to like it. I personally think it's too much. The designs for everything need to be a lot simpler. But so I will go on some of the things I didn't like about Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. First of all, there are only 4 classes: defenders, leaders, strikers, and garbage. There are really only 4 classes. If you play 2 defenders, if you play both a fighter and a paladin, the differences between the two are very minor, and there's a lot of overlap in their abilities. almost every leader has an ability that they can heal for 2d6 twice an encounter as one of their encounter abilities. And it's healing word, healing song, healing prayer, healing whatever. And so, like, if you're playing a bard, cleric, whatever, it still feels very samey, honestly. One of the other things I don't like is, so they have the 4 rules, which are Striker Defender, Leader, and Controller. Strikers are a character class that's designed to do a lot of damage to a single target. They pick a target and have high damage output. Rogues and Rangers and I believe Barbarians, Warlocks are strikers, you know. You say, I'm going to hurt that guy, and you hurt that guy. Then there are defenders, and defenders are meant to draw aggro. They take hits. They, you know, have a lot of health, have a lot of defense, maybe a little bit of self-healing, and a lot of them have the ability to draw aggro, which is contentious design, but I will talk about that here in a minute. Then you have leaders. And leaders are kind of your buffers, you know, white mages. They heal, they give you buffs, they protect you, they, you know, punish those who are trying to attack you. And then there are controllers, which are supposed to be AoE. And if we're being completely honest, a lot of the strikers can do AoE as well as a lot of the controllers. And they're also supposed to be focused on debuffs, but a lot of the leaders do debuffs just as well, if not better, than the controller. Like the wizard in this book, who's just the only controller, just there's nothing to him that it makes him worth playing over a warlock or a ranger or a cleric, something of that nature. Other controllers got better, but I don't think they ever really truly found the place for the controller. And also what they should have done was just take AoE effects away from the other ones and just make it so that the controller, you know, they're mook killers. They wipe mooks out and they specialize in debilitating the opponent versus the leader, who should specialize in buffing allies. But anyway, I don't necessarily mind that idea of having controller, because it kind of allows players to gather what their role in the party is. If I'm playing a defender, I know that my job is to take hits and draw aggro. Unfortunately, a lot of the defenders also kind of did striking as well. Once again, it's kind of a fault in the system that the classes aren't really defined as well as they need to be, and they don't always do what they're supposed to do. Like I said, a lot of just samey gameplay. And another huge issue, and I know that later books I think fixed it, fights took forever. My brother was running a module, and like I said, this was a module. This was like a licensed Wizards of the Coast, this is the way we expect you to play the game product. And we had like, I think, a 7-man group, 6 or 7 people, and we were fighting on an airship. And I'm not kidding, this fight took 4.5, this wasn't a boss fight. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a boss fight. I mean, it was a somewhat major fight, but it took 4.5 hours for us to beat this fight. Just, oh, it was so good. And like, it's like, okay, so like you have this ability and it'll do weapon times 7 damage. As your daily ability, or weapon times 4, probably not weapon times 7. Like, that's pretty exceptional. What it might do, okay, you hit the target and it does weapon times 4 plus ability modifier damage. And you're using a D10 weapon, so that's 5.5 times 4, which will be what, 22. Yeah, 22 damage plus ability modifier, probably about 5. So they're looking at 27 damage, and this is their daily power. This is your God Killer ability, 27 damage, and the opponent might have 200, 250 hit points. Now that's assuming that attack hits. So it's like, if your big attack hits, you get 1/10, and after that, you're going to do considerably weaker attacks. You'll throw in 3 or 4 encounter powers, which might do weapon times 2 damage, and after that you're gonna do daily powers, which will be weapon damage with a small boost. And its fights take forever, and that's one boss monster. He'll probably have wall mooks in front of him, ones that are designed to similar to defender tank aggro. And so like fights just took forever in the book. Some people, and the hack was when you're creating taking monsters, you have their healths and double their damage output, and that evens the fights out a little bit. But that seems like something that should have been figured out in playtesting. You know what I mean? Like, you should have been like, man, you play testing, been like, man, these fights are taking 2 hours long. And I don't know, maybe the playtesters, just all of them were people who thought that long fights are the same as epic fights, which they're not. Which I might talk about fight encounters at another time, but I don't like Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition. What it does bad, I think it did really bad. And it's something that's bled into 5th Edition that I cannot stand. And there's something kind of bad in 3rd Edition. Pathfinder did a lot to fix it. Pathfinder 1st Edition did a lot to fix it. And if you guys, Pathfinder 1st Edition has been talked about pretty heavily. But if you'd like to see my thoughts on it, go ahead and leave a comment. In the comment section, just let me know, because I could talk about some Pathfinder, but it's one of those games that I feel has been spoken about pretty extensively in the tabletop role-playing gaming community. Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition has been as well, but it is overwhelmingly negative, and I don't think that Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition deserves as much hate as it gets. But the thing I don't like is, so let's, you're taking a class and you're given, okay, you get a couple of skills. Like, here we go, the fighter. It's like trained skills. From the class skills below, choose 3 trained skills. So you can be trained in athletics, endurance, healing, intimidate, or streetwise. And you get 3 of those. Okay, but what if my fighter what if he came from a family of wizards? Like, he's the black sheep. He doesn't have natural magic powers, but he came from a family of wizards, and like this was part of like ingrained in my backstory. So it makes sense for my character to be trained in Arcana. Well, rules is written too fucking bad. Like, fighters can't learn things about magic, and I think there's a feat in here that gives you extra training, but I would rather just let players pick some skills that make sense for their abilities, like make sense for their background. Like, is there skill focus? Yeah, you get skill training. You can burn one of your feats, which you could use to get +1 accuracy and damage with a weapon. That thing is going to make you better, or you can use it to fill your background out, which you're going to make your character better because obviously you would. That's kind of one of these problems a lot of these games have, is your choice is making your character more efficient or making your character more rich. And just, you're going to make it more efficient, because if you don't, you're going to lag behind. And there are little points you can do that, like give yourself enrichment abilities here and there, but 3rd edition, where like profession was a skill, where you could be a profession farmer, profession baker, no one really took that, because you could be profession farmer, or you could use those skill ranks to get perception, spot, listen, or swim, or knowledge, religion, or alchemy, something of that nature that's going to come up a lot in gameplay. Your knowledge of your knowledge of animal husbandry isn't really going to come up. It's not something that's really going to take into play nearly as much as, say, your ability to climb a wall, or even your ability to swim. Depending on the campaign. I played some campaigns where, swim, but you know what I mean? It's like, I can make my character make sense for my backstory, or I can make my character good. And that's really the problem here. And 5th edition's the same. It's like, oh, you're a... And, yeah, people are like, well, the backgrounds. I'm like, okay, but what if I don't want, with my background, the backgrounds that have the skill I want don't have the feat ability, whatever the heck they're called, the background traits I want. How about you just let players pick a couple skills for free? You just... I think that should be tied to intelligence. When you have a higher int, you should be allowed to have more personal skills, like, let's say Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. If you have a +3 intelligence, you pick 3 skills or tools that you're proficient with. Bam, bam, bam. And like that, just to kind of show that your character has picked up things, and maybe even give them like a minimum one. Everybody gets at least one that just fills out who they are as a character, because like it's just, I don't know, it's something I don't like. And that leads me into something I like in 4th edition that they did wrong, and that is skill challenges. So the idea of a skill challenge is, okay, so the ones I remember is like you go and do a haunted house and you're trying to investigate a ghost. So what the DM can do is he can have a sheet of paper here, and he can mark off successes, fails. So 5 and 5. So you go around the table and ask the players, what do you want to do to try to draw this ghost out? And you go, okay, I want to do knowledge arcana to see if I any magic. Or a player could do an investigation check or a knowledge religion check or something of that nature. And of course, the problem with D&D 4th edition skill challenges is to be like, okay, you can do one of these 4 skills, and they're the only ones that matter. So do you want to do A, B, C, or D skill? You want to do arcana, investigation, knowledge religion, or I don't know, insight, to try and get a vibe of the ghost. And it's like, okay, well, I have an idea. I'm going to try and draw the ghost out using an intimidation. No, you can't. You can't, because there's only 4 allocated that are okay systems for the skill challenge to work. And if you're not trained in any of those skills that are on the skill challenge, well, then you're just shit out of luck. You're just, you just can't help the party. I remember it was one where we were having a conversation with a nobleman, and it meant that characters who weren't trained in charisma-oriented skills, which my wizard wasn't, even though my wizard was supposed to be this charlatan, this kind of like smooth talker, this, con man. He knew magic, but like the traditional wizard abilities like lore and history were less important to him than they were, say, bluff and diplomacy, because that was just his thing. His study of magic was meant more to be a means to his con game versus something like this studied wizard in a library going over tombs for. And so, but my wizard couldn't be that, because rules is written. You don't get persuasion, you don't get fucking bluff as a skill. You get, let me find, because I'm right here. What are train skills? So you get 3. You're trained in Arcana. I love this. Train skills. You start with Arcana. You're automatically trained in Arcana, and then you get to pick three from this list, which includes Arcana. I'm already trained in it. Oh, I guess he did get diplomacy, dungeoneering, history, insight, nature, religion, but he didn't get bluff. And that was like a big thing with my wizard, was he was like a fast talker. But I remember one of our players, and I don't remember what she was playing. probably a druid. That seems like, or a warlock. That seems like what she'd be playing. But anyway, she didn't pick any social skills because the character wasn't meant to be social. And so, like, in this, and since every player participates, all she could do was hurt our chances of succeeding. It kind of sucks because it just means like you're very limited a lot in how this game system, how you can do the skill challenges. I actually think skill challenges are a cool idea. So, like, let's say you're on a boat and the boat is attacked and you fight off the monsters that attack, but your boat is sinking. So, as the DM, I can go skill challenge. All right, here we go. 6 and 6. Fail succeeds. If you fail, we go to this fail state. If you succeed, we go, or game state, not fail state. Game state. If you succeed, we go to this game state. So I can go, okay, what are you going to do? Like, I'm going to use my engineering skill to help patch these holes to slow it down. Okay, cool. So, DC 15. I'm not saying it to the player. Let them roll. Like, okay, so let them roll the dungeoneering or engineering. Okay, so they got 17, so that's a success. And then you can tell them, okay, as you start, going up and patching these holes, you notice that the flow of water has slowed down somewhat. And then, maybe the barbarian can just be like, I'm going to bail water. I'm just going to take barrels of water and try to carry them over and bail. And so you can go, okay, so straight strength check. They see DC 10 strength check. Let him roll it. Okay, what do you do? And the bar can be like, okay, I'm going to sing to try to keep people's morales up and try to keep them focused on tasks and stop them from panicking and, kind of get everybody organized. Okay, let them roll that and kind of let them suggest what they're doing to solve the problem as opposed to saying, these are the 4 skills you roll, succeed or fail. And of course, also you have to consider interesting fail states. Okay, so the boat, you fail at the sinking boat. What happens? Well, you could be like, okay, now you're stranded on this small island. You let them know that there was a failure. The crew had died, or a lot of the people in the boat had died, and maybe they lose some gear. You don't want to strip them naked. And you might, depending on how you want. But now you're on this island, and you got to figure out a way to get off this island. So, now they have a new task in front of them that they're trying to do, and you could make that a skill challenge, or you could just make that into a small mini adventure where they're on this island. And if they succeed, they manage to get most of the passengers and crews on lifeboats, and they go off and they end up, where maybe not where the destination was, but off kind of on the road, and they can travel on the road. So you have 2 states, game states, if they fail, if they succeed, where they can continue moving forward, because it's very old game design. The idea, you fail, everybody dies, and now the game, whatever. That's not interesting. That's not an interesting way of handling failures. But I think skill challenge. This was a good rough draft for skill challenge. It could have been better. There's some improvements that needed to be made, but it could have been. But it's something that absolutely was useful. Something else. So the game has what are called I can't remember. It's what AEDUs, at will, encounter, daily, and utility powers. And I didn't like them at first, but I don't hate them the way I used to when I first played. So how it works, you have at-will powers, and here's the clerics. So you have at-will prayers, the ones in the little green box. So, these are you can use them whenever you want, however you want. You can use them all the time. So, these are paladins, not cleric. But kind of how the at-will powers work is they'll have something like, I believe you pick 2. So you start with 2 of these at-will powers. And you can always do a basic attack, but generally speaking, these are just slightly better than a basic attack. So you have Valiant Strike, where you attack the opponent, but it does weapon plus strength modifier damage with a basic attack. But your attack is strength plus 1. So you roll d20 plus your proficiency bonus plus your strength plus 1. So this attack is just slightly more accurate than a standard melee attack. And like I said, you can do it all the time. And that's kind of how they work. Like the Holy Strike is strength versus AC. That's how attacks work, is you attack solely strength versus AC. So you'll d20 plus proficiency bonus plus strength. And then there's 4 defenses: AC, reflex, will, and fortitude. Most physical attacks attack versus AC. And then the Holy Strike lets you also mark the target and do wisdom damage on top of your normal physical damage. Just things like that. And like I said, you do them at will. And they make it so that every character's basic attack isn't just d20 plus weapon damage. And then you have encounter powers, which are the little red ones here. Those are encounter powers. And you can do those once per fight. So the one here is Radiant Smite. So once per fight, you do strength versus AC. So you do d20 plus ability modifier, strength plus, ability modifier plus strength. And you attack versus their AC. And this one does double your weapon damage. So if you have a d8 weapon, if you're using a longsword, you do 2d8 instead of normal 1d8 plus strength plus wisdom modifier. And this does radiant damage instead of melee damage. And then you have daily powers, which are the ones in like that kind of dark gray black, that dude right there. And these ones you use once per day. And how daily powers work is they are supposed to be like your, knock you out kind of attacks. Like this one here is Paladin's Judgment. Strength versus AC, it does 3 weapon damage plus strength modifier damage, and 1 ally within you can spend a healing surge. So that would allow you to hit a target for a lot of damage. And healing surges are hit dice in 5th edition. You have it when you have so many healing surges based on your level, and you can burn them, except healing surges a lot of times you could burn in certain situations in combat. So basically it lets me burn it up and you gain, like, I think it's a d6, d8, some kind of hit point, something like that. Now one of the things I like is a lot of these daily powers have this thing here where it says, if you can see it, miss. Now what that means is if you miss your attack, if you whiff Paladin's Judgment, one ally within 5 squares of you can spend a healing surge. So even if you don't hit the target, one of your allies can still do the healing. On pain of death, they still take a little tiny bit of DOT damage. So I love that your 1 per day, your big, your knockout, your power attack, even if you miss, even if you roll a 1 on that attack, it almost always does something. Even if it is just like ability modifier damage, half damage. Even if it is just, I get my ally gets a healing surge. You still get something out of it. You don't just say, well, that was my big attack. My round's over. I did nothing and I used up my one cool ability. Which is something desperately more games need, which is attacks, especially major attacks that still do something when you fail the roll. You still aid the fight somehow. And then there are utility powers. And utility powers are just general abilities. They can be daily or usually daily or encounter. And they will do something not directly combat oriented. Like here, Astral Speech, you can once per day just give yourself +4 diplomacy checks. So in that situation where you're talking to the king, the paladin can just be like, Astral Speech, and then gain a boost to his ability to talk to the king, help you with that particular situation. Like one of the wizards one is Featherfall. So if you're falling, you can just be like, Utility power and encounter or something. Might be daily. Okay, I'm no longer falling 100 miles an hour, so daily power is having a miss effect, and I think a handful of encounter powers do too. But for the most part, your daily powers will have an effect where they will do something on a miss. One of the other things I think desperately needs to come back is, let's see if no, that's the rogue. Let's see if I can find him, because I think he was one of the coolest ideas, and people don't like him. And even though this, like I said, this ugly dude here who is way over designed, look at that armor. That is useless. That armor is gonna hinder you more than your it's gonna stop an opponent. But you see here, the Warlord. Now, the Warlord was a martial leader. So some of the things he would do would be like, he would like yell in combat and allow players to spend healing surges. And there was an argument of you can't shout a hand back on, which, I mean, that unpacking that argument is mind-boggling. First of all, in D&D, you can't knock hands off. That's not, when you take damage in D&D, your hands don't fall off, so it doesn't really matter. Your health and I know this is something contentious, and I will keep, your health in Dungeons and Dragons is not how much meat is on your body. When you take damage, it is not pieces of body parts flying off. That's not how it worked. That's never been how it worked. From a first edition OD&D basic, it's never been meat. Ever. Since the dawn of the game. So the idea that you're yelling and healing. Secondly, you can't magic a hand back on either. If somebody gets his fingers cut off, stand there and cast a spell at it in real life and see how quickly they heal. Like, so it's absurd. The idea of the Warlock's healing surges is you're like, oh man, it's that the corner man in boxing, the guy's like, oh man, I don't know if I can do it. He gives him a squirt of water, you rub some spit and dirt into the wound, you slap him on the back and you go, get in there, kid, you got one more fight in you. You got one more round in you. Get in there, kid. And then, that it's like, yeah, I can do this. Fight through the pain. I have one more round in me. I got one more round in me. And that's what the Warlord did. And of course, we'll never see it because the people who designed 5th edition are not very fun and also not very good at game design. Sorry, you guys. All you guys did was create a bunch of house rules for 3rd edition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. People drool over people like Mike Merles and you're not that great, guys. Sorry. Anyway, so it'd be great to have the Warlord back. The magic items are not great. They're kind of pointless. The feats, I didn't like the way they did multi-classing, but the game really didn't need multi-classing. You don't really need multi-classing because, you get, every time you level up, you'll get, okay, so I'm level 8, so now I can get a new encounter power, and I can replace an old encounter power with a new encounter power because I hit that level. One of the things I don't particularly care for is, it's like, okay, so, in Cleric, you can be a Cleric who baps a dude with a mace, or you can be a Cleric who, they call them laser clerics, fire radiant damage. And you'll get access to, okay, so you want this new ability, do you want one of these 2 abilities that bonk them with the mace, or one of these 2 abilities that fire lasers? Well, your entire cleric is spec'd out for laser clerics, so you might as well not even have those 2 options. They're completely useless to you, so there's very much an illusion of choice involved. There's a number of feats that increase accuracy and damage, and you pretty much have to take them in order to balance out the damage curve. So the feats kind of suck, and I understand why 5th edition they took the feats out. I like D&D feats because I think it adds a layer of customization to the characters. But as I talked about in my D20 Modern review and a little bit in my Know Your Role review, they there's a talent system that I think should have been adapted into future editions. That kind of would have removed the need for feats. But one of the things that I actually do like is the I think that a lot of the abilities are fun in the game, and there's a lot of kind of this ability to sync your powers up. Like I could do a thing where, maybe the controller hits a target and then they blast them with an area, and now they're all susceptible to lightning damage. So now the warlock can come in and fire a blast, an Eldritch blast that's lightning attuned, or whatever. The fighter can pull out his lightning sword and team up. And there's some of that in 5th edition, but it is mostly just I cast a spell that makes this effect, and then the fighters can just kind of do it. And then flanking, of course, the gaining advantage. Another problem with Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition was modifiers, because they wanted and I think this once again was a good place to start. It needed to refine, but almost everything a character could do would affect the battlefield on a whole. Whether it was I hit a target and now I gain a +2 to hit, or my ally gains a +2 to hit, or in a burst all the allies lose 2 to their AC and reflex defenses, or they're now susceptible to a certain element, or now I'm resistant. But because every single character had the ability to affect the battlefield on something like that, every time you did something, there was another +2, +1, -2, -1 on some character that needed to be tracked. You almost needed an Excel spreadsheet to calculate all of the different modifiers. And it created this absolute nightmarish mess of modifiers. It was like, hey, +2, +2, +2, +2, -2, -1, +1. But I get advantage. But wait, I only get advantage if this player does this. It's like, okay, well, that player has a +2, +2, -1, -1, but this thing that will give you advantage gives him another -2. Oh, but wait, this character just did something across the field that gave everybody, and it's like, so something a little more refined, I think, could work, where, players could just hand bonuses off. Okay, I did this, you next ability, you gain this, and kind of hand it back and forth, could make the numbers a lot smaller. I don't know. So it needs workshop, but it is nice that the players, every character, because a huge thing with 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 5th edition is that is pretty exclusively a spellcaster. Wizard, warlock, sorcerer, druid, cleric, bard somewhat have the ability to actually affect the entire field, everyone on the field, all allies, fighter, paladin, barbarian, ranger. They tend a lot more to just, okay, what do I do to hit a target a little harder, maybe hit multiple targets, but they're not actually contributing to the whole of the field outside of Dan. There's a couple of things that aren't quite that, like, for example, the Barbarian Spirit Shield, which is a nice kind of way to do that contributing, where he's not just, I hit target take more damage, because he can put up a Spirit Shield to reduce damage to an ally. That's a really nice ability. And I think, but everyone constantly was changing the flow of the battle in 4th edition. And while it made things a mess, it did, in a lot of ways, also make it so, when you did something, you didn't just knock numbers off of a chart until it hit 0. you actually affected the battlefield, the flow of battle as a whole. Um, so good idea, need refining. Man, there's something else I was gonna talk about that I don't remember what it was now that I actually kind of liked about fourth edition. Once again, a lot of fourth edition was good idea. And these fighters. A lot of defenders had the ability to draw aggro. Like I think a fighter had an. I'm not gonna look it up because it would require me to just go through every ability. But I think a fighter, and it might not even been in this book, had a power where he could taunt and draw enemies toward him. And at the time, a lot of, and probably even now, a lot of DMs probably throw a big tantrum about it because the player is actively affecting the flow of battle. You know, a fighter can taunt on a shield, and now this enemy has to attack them. There's no choice. That enemy has to attack him. And I like that because it allows defenders, characters who are tanks, to actually tank. Because, so if I've got my paladin, you know, because I like paladins, if I got my paladin who's a tank in the front lines, what's stopping the archer from shooting over my head at the wizard? It doesn't matter how tanky I made my character if the enemies aren't going to attack me. But Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition gave the defenders a lot of abilities to either force enemies to attack them, or if maybe not force an enemy to attack them, severely punish them for not. It's like, okay, so I draw this aggro, now the enemy can either attack me, you know, the tank with a lot of hit points and high AC, or he can choose to attack an ally, but he gets -2 to his attack roll, because, like I said, everything adds and subtracts 2. And maybe I get a free basic attack on him, which is the whole point of having basic attacks, is like attacks of opportunity. And certain abilities will just let you get free attacks, and you just roll d20 plus ability modifier versus AC, and you do weapon plus ability modifier damage, usually strength, sometimes dexterity, because dexterity needs shit. But so like my paladin can be like, okay, you're gonna hit me, and they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, okay, well, you suffer -2 if you want to hit the wizard, it's fine, but you suffer -2, so you're more likely to miss. And before you even do that, I just get a roll of free, d20 plus strength for 1d8 plus strength damage. So you're just taking a free hit just for not hitting me. And then the enemy basically is kind of in this position where they have to attack me or be punished. And the thing is, in first edition, second edition, third edition, fifth edition, only spellcasters get that right. Like, they don't really have the ability, a lot of the martial classes don't have the ability to really, like, get in there and be like, I'm gonna really, truly, if you're a tank, really, truly make the game affect you as the tank. It's basically the only reason a tank gets attacked in these editions is a gentleman's agreement that, well, I'm the fighter on the front line, so you're gonna hit me. But this isn't, Final Fantasy VI, where you have frontline characters who get, full physical, and backline characters get reduced damage but also reduced attack. Or it's not like these games where, okay, well, character at the top of the, like Final Fantasy 1, this character has, 50% aggro, this one has 30% aggro, this one has 10% aggro, you know what I mean? Probably like 10, blah, 50, 25, 15, 5. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I have my math's wrong, I don't care. But I think it's right. But you know what I mean, where it's like, okay, well, the AI will automatically target this character before no, the DM can do anything, and you end up with shit like Tucker's Kobolds, where these enemies that are acting tactically sound, they basically end up fucking the party over, and this guy who's built himself to tank, to draw aggro, just doesn't have any real ability to enact that strategy. But in 4th edition, there are a number of powers the defenders have that force the enemy to let the defender play the role he's trying to play. And honestly, that's really at the heart. I've gone over almost everything that really matters. There's rituals, and a fighter can cast, a handful of rituals. Oh, I opened right to it. Ritual Discretion. These are a lot of the non-combat spells in Dungeons and Dragons, and anyone can learn them. You just have to take a fee. Like wizards get the fee, ritual casting for free. But if a fighter wants to learn how to cast Arcane Lock, he's more than welcome to if he wants to burn a couple feats up. Once again, not really useful, but it's there. It's something that exists. There's the Healing Surge, which is a lot like the hit dice from modern 5th edition. There was some kind of wonkiness with it, but I think at the end of the day, it was kind of a nice system. And like I said, I think a lot of the healing in the game was a little too reliant on these healing surges. 5th edition did better, but I think problem with 5th edition is they don't do enough with the hit dice. It's like maybe a little balance where maybe there's more spells and abilities. If they did a warlock for 5th edition, I would have them play with the hit dice a lot. That would be like how I built that either class or archetype, because you can make the warlord just a fighter archetype. But yeah, that's that's pretty much everything. This isn't a good game. What it is a game filled with potential that was untapped. If somebody told me they want to play Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition campaign, I probably wouldn't get too excited over it. Like I said, I didn't enjoy the time. I played in 3 separate campaigns, and I didn't enjoy my time in any of them. 2 of them I played Wizards, and that was probably my problem because Wizards just suck. And one of them I played a Paladin, I believe. And I didn't really enjoy it. They have all the scriptors. You see here, Arcane, Divine, Martial. So Arcane classes are classes that are heavily influenced by magic. So, your Wizard, your Sorcerer, your Warlock. I think they had a Hexblade as their Defender. And like an Ardent as the leader, I think. Something like that. So, like, generally what you would have is you'd have Arcane, Divine, Martial, and then they later added Primal and Psychic. And Psychic was, wow. Psychic was so weird with its class bits. But yeah, so Divine were cleric and paladin, and they had like Warden, I think, was their controller. There was never a martial controller, which I didn't like. Me and my brother kind of toyed with the idea of having a grenadier as a martial controller. He'd throw bombs that would like explode or create like bursts of poison gas on the field, things like that. But 4th edition's dead and it's never coming back, so it's more or less mute point. But they had Primal, and these would be they had a flavor of the Ranger, because the Ranger's in here as a martial, and then you have Barbarian and Druid, and I don't know. And the Psychic had a Scion and Soul Knife, and then they had a Rune Priest and a Monk. And I don't know why the Monk was... Mine never matter, was what everybody explained to me, but yeah, the Monk as a Psychic was really weird. It's an interesting idea. The game should have done more with it. So, like, had certain enemies weak or resistant to arcane powers, weak or resistant to divine powers, weak or resistant to martial powers, to primal powers, to psychic powers. And I think that it's a cool idea. Because the idea is, your power source. So, like, if you're an arcane, you use arcane powers. And it would make sense that certain enemies, like maybe Fae or Automatons might be more weak to arcane because it disrupts their natural flow, whereas something like a goblin or an orc might be more weak to martial powers, because like they just like the way to deal with an orc is to smack him in the head with a bit of metal, and undead and demons might be particularly weak to divine, and maybe unnatural things like aberrants would be more weak to nature or primal, because the primal forces are disrupting and changing and altering and righting their unnatural ways. um so I think that they could have done more with it. Instead, they kind of just rely on the elements, slashing, bashing, piercing damage, which I've always hated, and I'm gonna get into that when I talk about martials and magic. Radiant divine generally does radiant damage. With your arcane, you're doing lightning, fire, ice damage. I think a lot of the primal do like poison. I don't know. It's kind of soulless, and D&D has always had this thing where they've always tried to do this thing where like players have like element types like Pokemon, but monsters don't really interact with it unless they're specifically resistant to it. Just, if an enemy is interacting with fire damage, it's generally to fuck the player rather than to enhance the player, and I don't care for that. I think that if enemies have resistances, they should have comparable amounts of weaknesses. So if they're resistant to cold, lightning, and fire damage, maybe they should be weak to psychic and radiant damage, in the case of like a devil or something. So it's an interesting idea, much like, once again, Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. The things they did right, they didn't do right enough to make up for the things they did wrong, like boring encounters, the magic item treadmill, which is worse here than it is in any Dungeons and Dragons game. 3rd edition is bad. The magic item treadmill is so bad in here. It's 5th edition fixed a lot of it by putting the power in the classes rather than magic items. But oh my gosh, like the magic item treadmill is like every level you're getting 1 or 2 more magic items to keep pace with the game. And it's just so silly and pointless. And the feats are just they're both crappier, boring, and weaker, but also in a lot of ways very necessitated in 4th edition. Because, like I said, a lot of it's just, we did the math wrong, put a feat in to fix the math, and that's just not fun. 5th edition has like feats that are a lot more fun. They're more or less unnecessary, but I think 5th edition feats have a lot more fun to them. Skill challenges, great idea, poor execution. Types: arcane, divine, martial, great idea, poor execution. The roles: fighter, defender, controller, leader. I don't think they're pretty good in execution. The problem is, in a game with 60 classes and only 4 roles, there's so much redundancy that you might as well only have 4 classes. Like, there's so much overlap within the classes that a lot of it is extremely boring. They added in a couple, the races just get straight up like 2+2s. They don't get negatives anymore, which is nice. You don't really get punished for being a dwarven bard. However, your ability scores are +2 constitution, +2 wisdom. You're gonna pick a class that uses both constitution and wisdom. That's unfortunate. 5th edition did a similar thing. At least no longer dwarves are just punished charisma. Elves are no longer punished constitution wise. Pathfinder didn't really fix it. Honestly, we should just do a Tasha's Cauldron of whatever, Cauldron of everything, whatever the fuck it's called. Just, okay, it doesn't matter what race you pick, you just get a +2 to any stat, because you also get other things, like you get skill bonuses. Dragonborn gets skill bonus to history and intimidate. Dwarves get to dungeoneering and endurance. I'm not super fond of that because it does still lead to a lot of racial oh, what do you call it? Like all dwarves are dungeoneers, like, but what if my dwarf isn't? But things like cast iron stomach to get a saving throw against poison. That's something that is just physically inherent to dwarves. That's not something really necessarily trained, or the encumbered speed where if you're encumbered you don't actually get slowed. No, that's just something that is physically inherent to dwarves. Um, those I don't mind as much. Like Dragonborn have dragon breath. They have a breath weapon they can use. Um, which well, once again is something physically inherent to what Dragonborn do. That's like the difference between I don't know, like it's weird to say like a human and a dog because like we do obviously have physical, like humans are just smarter than dogs. We just are smarter than dogs, but like a human have opposable thumbs, whereas a dog and a gorilla, a dog would have naturally bites, versus a gorilla would have opposable thumbs, and those would be two separate. And gorillas have bites too, but dogs just have more natural bite or digging ability, things like that. So that I don't necessarily mind as much. Absolutism, racial absolutism. Oh, and it's a huge problem D&D has had, and it's never been able to shake. In this idea of racial absolutism, all dwarves all fit into this stereotype, and people say humans are boring, and I strongly disagree. I'm probably gonna make a video about the racist species kin, his whatever the fuck they call it these days. In Dungeons and Dragons, because I think there is a lot of stuff in there to unpack. But like the natural like um absolutism of like dwarves all are engineers, dungeoneers, whatever. Not super fond of it. But that's a D&D problem. I do think they did a lot to try to start. They were moving in the right direction to fix the problems with races in Dungeons and Dragons. They didn't go far enough yet, but certainly you see where they're on the right track. One of the weirdest things is, so you have your four defenses, your armor class, which is your natural like defense, blocking, and armor, and then you have your three. There used to be saving throws in third edition. The defenses now, because the saving throws is a different thing. You have will, reflex, and fortitude defenses. So your fortitude defense is based on strength or constitution, whichever is higher. Gives you a bonus to your fortitude. So, like, the idea of, if you're strong or hardy, you just are naturally. And fortitude is like your thing to shake off poison or illness or, like, not like a physical attack, like a hit, but things that are just, like, directly trying to weaken you physically as a person. And then you have your will defense, which is based on wisdom, a lot of what's in wisdom is willpower and charisma. So the idea of having a lot of willpower, and there are a lot of mental effects like mind control. So having a lot of natural willpower helps you defend against that, and like having a high charisma also allows you a lot of that defense, because like you have a strong sense of self, of you strongly understand who you are. So mind effects that are changing this idea of who you are as the self are naturally be able to resist by charisma. As in third edition, it was fortitude was always constitution, will was always wisdom, and reflex was always dexterity. Well, now both your armor class, so your ability to block swords, and reflex, your ability to get out of the way of area of effects, like fireballs and explosions and things like that, is based on dexterity, naturally, because yeah, and intelligence. And as And when I was younger, an uncoordinated nerd, I'm gonna tell you this right now: my intelligence never got me out of the way of being shoved or punched or kicked. Yeah, it's so, and I understand that it's a game and it's very mechanic, and but it was so, and I still hate it. I still hate it. It's still so silly to me that having a high intelligence, and yes, I understand that being in a fight requires a certain amount of mental acuity. I know I have fucking 5 black belts. Trust me, I get it. But it's just still so weird that your ability to parry attacks can be based on your intelligence. No, I guess it's not that bad because intelligence desperately needs something else to it. But it just seems silly to me. But hey, they tried, and once again, they've done a number of things right, just not right enough. I'd actually like to see someone take the fourth edition system and tweak it a little bit. I know Pathfinder Second Edition has a lot of that. I haven't actually played any Pathfinder Second Edition yet. Um, it looks kind of, I don't want to say heavy. It looks kind of boring. Like you just get a whole bunch of powers that don't really spice. And once again, I could be wrong. I haven't played it. It doesn't hit me with a spark like a lot of other games have. However, I did, using all the rules on this app I built, build a Terminator. So that's kind of cool. Is a time traveling automaton ranger who specializes in gun weapons and stalking. Who specializes in stalking targets and just high resistance to like damage. It's kind of a fun character. I kind of a fun build. Probably wouldn't play it. Somebody wanted to play Pathfinder Second Edition. I wouldn't say no. It wouldn't be like if somebody's like, "Hey, we should play Vampire the Masquerade," and I'd be like, "Yeah, we could not." I'd still probably play Vampire the Masquerade if one of my friends wanted to, but no. Or something like, um, oh, what is it called? Prime Directive or something of that nature. World of Cinnabar. I probably wouldn't play. Just and same with, but Pathfinder Second Edition. I probably would just to give it a shot, just to see, and then I'd be able to review it on here because I'm not reviewing any games on this channel that I haven't actually played myself. Um, so every game I've played, Know Your Role, D20 Modern, Dungeons and Dragons, Fourth Edition, all of them are games that I have played. Now to end this off, I will tell you the game is primarily a gamist game. The game is 75-80% gamist. The game is all about picking abilities that interact with your numbers. It's all about modifying the game's math numbers. In fact, you don't even have distance in this game. You're not like, oh, this attack will move a target 10 feet. It's specifically squares. The game very, very much is meant to be. All of D&D is meant to be played with the hex grid. People who think it's theater of the mind are deluding themselves. I digress. But it is very just openly a gamist game. It is heavily gamist. After that, I would probably say simulationist because all of the flavor in the game is less about like expanding your character, more about like what your cool powers do. Like with a scream and holding your hand up high, shining light from your chosen god shines down across the battlefield and then does 2d6 plus wisdom radiant damage to a target, and they're blinded until they make a saving throw. So it's you're not really building like a character and a huge background. It is very much almost all the flavor is about how your cool powers interact with the world. So it's trying to simulate this super high fantasy, epic magic kind of game. And then it's narrative, like the game doesn't really do much to facilitate creating long-term narratives and huge character arcs. That's not really what the game is interested in. Somebody's gonna argue with me, I'm sure, that it's super narrative. It's not. Not saying once again you can't do narrative with it, but the game itself, book cover to cover, is very little interested in creating huge narratives. And even the DMG isn't as huge into like narrativism as this book is. Um, but yeah, there you go. It's a games game followed by a simulationist game followed by a narrativist game. But anyway, I haven't decided what my next topic's gonna be, but when I do, I will record it and I will see y'all next time. Bye.